ladies and gentlemen. So for those of you still standing, and take your seats. We're going to get this session underway. So this is our penultimate session. It's the fourth session of the day. And it's titled Carbon Negative Cornwall. So I'm sure many of you in the room will be aware that Cornwall set an ambitious target around its carbon neutrality. And there's various retailers, supermarkets and governments. They've also set their own targets about being carbon neutral, or even about being carbon neutral. The question we're asking in this session is, can Cornwall go further than that? Can Cornwall be carbon negative? Can it deliver, because of its environment and its opportunities, deliver a greater benefit to the society as well as to our own economy and to ourselves? So I'd like to hand over to the session chair, to Becky Wilson. Becky.
Thank you ever so much, James, and it's lovely to be here this afternoon. For any of you that don't know me, my name's Becky, and I'm the Technical Director of the Farm Carbon Toolkit. We're a farmer-led organisation really aiming to try and provide practical tools and resources for farmers around reducing greenhouse gas emissions, improving energy resilience, with a particular focus on soil health. And we have a range of different projects happening right here in Cornwall, from our Farm Net Zero project. You've heard some of the farmers that are involved in that speaking already today, our soil carbon project and all those other sorts of things. So as James says this afternoon, we are really lucky to be joined by some absolutely excellent panelists who are going to help us start to consider some of these things around the ability for Cornwall to be carbon negative. And we know there's a huge amount of sort of jargon that is used around this topic. We don't seem to be able to not open a newspaper or turn on the telly to hear about agriculture's environmental impact. We've already spoken about that a little bit today. And when we then start thinking about the ability for us as an industry to reach net zero, or do, as James says, go even further, it really highlights the ability of Cornwall to really pioneer the way in terms of what we can do with our land management, our agricultural systems, and the amazing diversity that we have down here in terms of our farming systems, soil types, and management practices. So we're going to hear today from, as I say, 3 different speakers talking about some of their activities that they're doing, which will give us a really good starting point to then start to dig a little bit deeper into some of those practical things that for us as farmers we can do that will help to reduce our emissions and improve sequestration. Because remember that although we're talking about carbon and carbon negativity, actually we're really thinking about those 3 greenhouse gas emissions. So carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide, and looking at what we can do to reduce those, as well as the ability of our landscapes to hold more carbon and provide that unique ability that we have as an industry to provide that climate solution. So we're first going to hear from Jenny Rogers, who's from Forest for Cornwall, and she's going to tell us all about what their new offers are and how they can support landowners to actually start to put more trees on their farms. We're then going to hear from Megan from Leaf. Megan is working across a range of projects to integrate biodiversity and productive farming through her work in the Penwith Farm Landscape. And then we're going to hear from Kevin and Kate Hoare, who are farming and are doing some very, very exciting things with slurry. So hold on to your hats, because it's going to get great. So I'm going to start by handing over to Jenny to tell us all about Forest for Cornwall.
Hello and welcome everyone. So my name is Jenny and I am from Forest for Cornwall. Some of you might have heard about Forest for Cornwall. We have been going since 2019. It was originally started by Cornwall Council when they declared a climate emergency in response to the climate emergency that we're facing. They worked out that if 8,000 hectares of woodland was planted in Cornwall, that would sequester 1% of Cornwall's carbon. And if you think about how much land is needed for 8,000 hectares, that kind of gives you an idea of the scale of the amount of trees that needed to be planted. Excitingly, we are one of 2 authorities that have been awarded funding by DEFRA under the Woodland Creation Partnership Fund. This was awarded in our recognition of the fact that many landowners, many farmers are wanting to get trees planted, but the processes that they have to go through create a barrier to wanting those plans to happen. So we have set up the Trees and Woodland Fund. What we are able to do with this Trees and Woodlands Fund is provide free consultancy to farmers and landowners to support their tree planting ambitions. So a consultant would come out to the farmer, landowner, do all the planning, sort out all the grant fundings, do the grant applications, potentially seek out contractors to help with the work. They will explore a variety of funding options that are out there. Many of you might know about the England Woodland Creation Offer, or UCO, which is the main offer out there, which works really well for some people who have got the space, but not all farms and landowners have got that space. You don't want to be taking out good quality agricultural land to plant trees on, because it has to be taken out of agricultural use under UCO. So we also look at other funding schemes out there, such as more woods and more hedges. The exciting thing that we've got that we can offer, though, is this scope to direct fund projects as well. Because I'm sure you can all appreciate there's a lot of different tree planting schemes that are left out of things like UCO. So these might be items such as field corners, shelter belts, and also orchards, which within Cornwall, 90% of the orchards have been lost. And if you are a commercial farmer and looking for diversification, orchards could offer a really interesting way to incorporate trees into your farming practice, and we can support with that. The other projects that we are looking to fund are to support 10 agroforestry schemes across Cornwall. We're looking for a diverse range of farming techniques, so some examples that we're looking at are dairy. We're also looking at a cut flower business, just to get that diversification so that people can go out and see examples of how agroforestry can work. Obviously, when you're using trees are slow growing. It's a big responsibility to take that on and incorporate that into your business, and we appreciate that, so that's why we want to support people with this process. We would fund the whole thing, including expert consultancy. We're working with a number of groups such as Cornwall Wildlife Trust and also FWAG to help deliver this. And there'd be maintenance payments, which are similar to things that you'd get under UCO or countryside stewardship. What we would ask, like I was saying, though, is that farmers who are involved become that demonstration, become a speaking focus for others to come and see how agroforestry can work. So I've stolen or used this from our colleagues over in the AOMB. This is just to sort of talk about how you can incorporate trees into your farming practice potentially. This is a made-up, I don't know if you can all see it at the back, this is a made-up Cornish environment. So you've got some moorland, you've got your estuarine areas, you've got fields, you've got some hedges. The problem with trees is sometimes people think you have to plant up whole areas of trees to incorporate them in your farming practice. But I'll click forwards and backwards between these images, and hopefully you can see that there are ways that you can incorporate trees without hopefully making too much of an impact on the area that you can farm and work with. So, with that next image here, you can see you've joined up areas here, so you've linked in, creating that corridor there. You're linking in, just going up the edges of the moor. You've got orchards here, with animals can graze around. You've got the addition of standing trees, which provide shelter for animals, copses, improved and taller hedges, which again provides benefits for animals and grazing for cattle. And obviously all of this will also sequester carbon and have multiple other benefits, such as water retention, runoff, and all those additional benefits that trees bring. So just go back to the original one there so you can sort of see the difference, maybe a bit clearer. So that's just sort of give you an idea of how you might be able to incorporate them. And then, oops, sorry, apologies. The other thing I'd like to just mention as well in terms of other ways that you can increase your biodiversity and also improve your carbon. Trees aren't the answer to everything. You can't plant, they're not suitable for every environment. Obviously, especially out in Penwith, it's a harsh environment. There's lots of designations which make the planting of trees at large scale quite difficult. At Cornwall, we're working on this new website which farmers, land agents, organisations can sign up to. You would register your farm or your land, and then what that does is that would alert you to every form of funding that you are eligible for. So if you wanted to create a wildflower meadow, you might get a notification about new funding available in your area. It could be things all the way through to government funding, down to crowdfunding opportunities. Is to try and put farmers and landowners in control and not having to go to external agencies to find out what they are eligible for. So that's something. Now, I have got cards if anyone's interested. It is in development, so it's going through the process, so it might be a bit clunky to begin with, but hopefully, and I should say that Darras is Cornish for door, so you're opening the door to opportunity. And that's me. Okay, you save your questions for the end. Thank you.
Brilliant. We're going to have Megan next.
Yeah, I also feel pressured into standing up now. So, so hello, my name's Megan Whatty, and I work for Leaf Linking Environment and Farming. So I'm from Mevagizzy, so I came a long way today. But actually, for work, I'm now up in the dreaded Midlands. So I've moved up country. So who we are, so essentially we work with a range of stakeholders, whether that's farmers, scientists, supermarkets, policymakers, etc. And we work to deliver and promote climate positive, thriving, resilient and exemplar ecological farming. So some of you, especially if you went to Seal Hayne, you may have known Caroline Drummond. She was our chief executive who sadly passed away of springtime of last year. But she founded Leaf and she led us for the last 30 years, so we're now trying to carry on her legacy. So in terms of the areas that we work in, so there's sort of three key pillars that we refer to. So the first is knowledge generation and exchange, and this is the area that I work in. So this is sort of a range of technical related projects and events, which are normally sort of farmer-led projects, and I'll go into these a little bit in a second. The second is we work to do with market opportunities, so the Leaf Mark certification standard, that's a separate part of our work. And then another huge bit of work that we do is our work in the education and engaging society area. So Leaf Open Farm Sunday, and we've got a regional educational consultant in Cornwall called Lisa Dunn, who essentially, if you want to look at hosting school visits or educational visits on your farm, she can provide free support and look at funding opportunities to try and help you to do that. So, oh, that's gone very strange colours. But essentially, one of the big things that we promote at Leaf is called integrated farm management. And this is essentially a management approach that tries to look at the whole farm in a holistic way, so that it's sort of looking at each aspect and sort of in an interconnected way, so that sort of the whole farm is considered and all three pillars of sustainability, so both the economic, social and environmental sides of things. So it's it's not prescriptive. It's sort of a site-specific approach, and it's more of a sort of mindset to encourage continuous improvement when you're looking at managing the farm. And sort of leading off of that, I think one of the problems that can arise when you're looking at the carbon challenge is what they call carbon tunnel vision. So the whole sort of challenge and everything can be focused just on carbon, when actually if you try and view it in this more integrated approach where actually it fits into lots of different things, say if you're planning some biodiversity work on your farm, you don't have to then plan sort of separate carbon work. It's looking at how the plans that you've already got can also sequester carbon. So it's sort of, again, trying to view it in that holistic way. So just in terms of some of the work that we do in this area, so the key bit of work that I lead on is the Leaf Network. So this is essentially where we have a range of demonstration farms around the country, and these work to sort of promote sustainable practices. So we'll do different knowledge exchange events, projects, and sort of peer-to-peer learning related things, to try and sort of encourage farmer-to-farmer learning, really. So we've recently started working with Varfell Farms down the road through the Penwith Landscape Partnership, and they're actually going to be our first Cornish leaf demonstration farm. So we'll be having an event there in March time. Another bit of work that we do is the Nature-Based Solutions Project. So this is what Kate and Kevin were involved in. And this is where we worked with 10 farms around the country to help them do carbon baselining measurements, so carbon footprinting tools. And then after that, we paid for specialist advisors to visit each farm. So we worked with Cornwall environmental consultants and essentially sort of providing different support to farms so that they can look at how they can use nature-based solutions rather than, the technology silver bullet to tackle some of the challenges which climate change poses. And a recent project which we've just started is the Co-op Net Zero project. So it's actually very similar to the one that Becky is running to do with Farm Net Zero Cornwall, where we're working with 5 farms over 3 years to try and support them on the net zero transition. And again, it's sort of a mix of workshops, training, sort of on-farm events and specialist advisors to help them identify where they can potentially reduce their carbon footprints. So I just thought I'd quickly give some examples of some sort of interesting ways in which some of our farmers and some of our demonstration farms are trying to reduce carbon emissions. So this first picture on the left is quite an extreme example. So this is a farm up in Fife in Scotland, and they're using multi-species cover crops of 8 species. So I think they've got Phacelia, sunflower, oil radish, quinoa, or quinoa, however you say it. And they essentially let this grow up until, you can see there's a huge amount of biomass in the field. And they then crimp it down and spray it off before direct drilling into it. And so this field, I think, was going into either oats or wheat afterwards. But by doing that direct drilling and not disturbing the soil and sort of having those living roots in the soil all year round, like pumping that root exudate and carbon into the ground, it's obviously locking up carbon, but also sort of doing this approach rather than the traditional plough and sow approach uses 200 pounds less in fuel per hectare. So it's not just to do with the soil, but both the time and money which can be spent on petrol. If you can reduce those field cultivations, then it can make a massive impact on your budget. Another farmer that we work with up in the Cotswolds is experimenting with using living mulches. So he's undersowing wheat with clover and then hoping that is improving his nitrogen fixation so that he can reduce his artificial nitrogen requirements. So this is a bit of a trials work, so it's ongoing. And obviously you've got to be really careful managing it so that your clover doesn't compete too much. But it provides the extra opportunities of, you can graze your sheep on there, and it stays in there for a couple years. And then he's also doing a range of nitrogen deep core sampling, precision application in line with this. And so far he's managed to reduce his artificial nitrogen requirements by 20% on his wheat. So it's pretty impressive savings, which obviously if you can reduce your NOx emissions, it's going to reduce your on-farm emissions pretty massively. And then on the livestock side, obviously I think it was mentioned earlier, if you can reduce the amount of feed that you're buying in, that's often a huge source of on-farm emissions. So whether it's improving sort of forage or growing some more protein-rich crops, there's a lot of research going on in the UK as to sort of, as the climate changes, alternative protein-rich crops that we can grow. So there's a lot of good information online about sort of different alternatives. And slurry storage is also a massive thing. So slurry storage and application. Obviously farming rules for water is a very big hot topic at the moment. So if you can try and store it properly, whether that's through using the DEFRA grants that are out at the moment to sort of improve your infrastructure or cover your slurry stores so that there's less volatilization. But essentially if you can kind of view your animal waste as a bit of an asset potentially rather than a waste product, because with fertilizer being so volatile and potentially being such a huge cost, if you can make the most of those nutrients, which either you've got if you've got livestock on your farm or your neighbour might have, and you can sort of use that in a way which will benefit you and reduce the amount of artificial N that you need to buy in, then it's a win-win really. So sort of in terms of easy wins, I put easy in connotations because I don't think any sort of change to your farming system is going to be easy. But start off with your baseline measurements. If you are going to be making targets to reduce your carbon emissions, you need to know what are your biggest sort of sources of emissions at the start so you can target them to make the biggest differences. Reducing your tillage, building up your soil organic matter. There's more and more research coming out that with that increased soil organic matter, sort of the increased nutrient recycling in the ground by all of the soil biodiversity can actually mean that if you are still applying sort of low to medium levels of artificial N, the ground will actually hold on to it a lot better. The sort of nutrients will be in a more available form, and it can sort of reduce how much you need to put on in the future. Building and maintaining fertility, so again, sort of using nature-based solutions, whether that's cover crops or sort of legumes and things in your rotation to try and build the fertility, and then keeping it there once it's there. So, using your cover and your catch crops so that you don't get that runoff. And then sort of, as I mentioned, livestock, trying to use those sort of nutrients as an asset. And I think one of the most important things to try and do if you're sort of as part of the net zero transition is collaborating. So whether that is, sharing machinery, if you sort of can't afford a direct drill, sort of doing a share thing with neighbours, or whether it's sort of straw for muck deals, or whether it's projects like Farm Net Zero Cornwall, or sort of some of the projects that we run. I think one of the most important things in this sort of journey to being carbon negative is going to be working together. So if you can collaborate, then try and do it. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to finish off with our panellists, we've got Katie and Kevin.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to stand up because everyone else has. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Katie Hoare. I farm with my husband Kevin and our 3 children. I don't have any slides, sorry, so it's just me talking. We farm on a Cornwall Council farm up near Saltash. We've got about 134 acres within the council farm, which is a dairy, and we rent altogether about 200 acres, 134 of that is part of the council. We took the farm on about 5 years ago. The aim being we'd got fed up with working for other people and we wanted to do something for ourselves and our children. Idea was I was going to stay home, milk a few cows, Kevin was going to go out and earn a fortune, and we were all going to have a lovely life. And it hasn't happened. Not yet, anyway. So once we started the journey, we sort of, bought in a few cows and did a bit of AI, had some replacement heifers, and we were lucky enough to get an ALA contract. We took that from my dad, inherited that from my dad, and sort of started dipping our toe into the farm carbon world and the ALA world, and it kind of snowballed, and I got a bit more enthusiastic about things, and I got involved with a project with Pruex and started understanding about good bacteria, bad bacteria, soil, grass, and it kind of had this huge snowball effect. And when we took the farm on, it was really tired. It looked beautiful. It was green as green, and we're like, yes, we're onto a winner here. Cows are going to milk like absolute trains off this, And it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And we thought, we're doing something really wrong here. So we got some people in, and they soil sampled the farm, and I think we were down as low as
4.5.
4.5 on our pHs. So that kind of answered our question why we weren't. Yeah. Answered the question why our cows weren't performing as we should. And it really opened our eyes to the fact that, we had a really good basis, but it just wasn't performing. We had an absolutely knackered slurry system. Everything that went in it came out the back of it just as fast. And the farmer that was in there before us, he was milking 3 times a day through an abreast parlour at one point, wasn't he? About 120 cows. He gave all his slurry to the arable farmer next door. He didn't put any fertiliser on the farm or any lime, and he disappeared after 5 years. The farm was knackered. We've had a lot of work to do and it sounds really ungrateful, but we're almost putting right somebody else's mistakes. We're working really, really hard to get the farm up to where it needs to be. By accident, purely, sort of Christmas time, 2018, we were having a conversation and we came across a company called Bannerman's. They were looking for some pilot farms to play with some slurry. We were in desperate need of a new slurry store. And being on a tenancy, just myself and my husband and our 3 children, we thought, what the hell, we've got nothing to lose, potentially a lot to gain. Yeah, we're game. Come and have a look at us, see if you can help us. And it's been a real eye-opener. I'll let Kev explain more about the workings of it all. But basically, they wanted somebody to take slurry, harness it, suck out the methane, see if it works, really. And like I said, we thought, why not try it, give it a go? We're lucky enough that we've got nobody, we haven't got mum and dad still holding the purse strings saying, oh, I don't think that's a very good idea. And we were literally on our own 2 feet, and we just thought it was definitely worth a go. So we're only, at the time, milking about 50 cows. It was a really, it was still quite small, we were still growing. We're now milking about 110. We are predominantly all year round calving, but we do vast majority late spring, early summer. Like I said before, we are lucky enough to be on an ALA owner contract. Cows are performing really well. We're averaging 4.7 butterfat, 3.5 protein, 0.3 feed rate, about 7,000 litres, which we'd like to increase as we go forward. I do all my own AI, so we've got our own replacement heifers, got about 55 replacement heifers to come through, which is really exciting. And like I said, we've been doing Farm Carbon Toolkit for our footprints. We're also in mid-tier and the SFI. And I've mentioned we use a product called ProX, which we sort of fell into at the beginning of our farming career with the good bacteria. And yeah, that linked with the methane pit, I think, has been a bit of a game changer for us, isn't it? But I'll let Kev explain that because it's quite technical.
Good afternoon. So as Kate mentioned, our journey has not been planned at all, really. We came into the farm thinking 50, 60 cows, which is what the farm was suited to when we took it on, really. And I was going to carry on. I've been an agriculture engineer, shed builder, fabricator, just carry on my trade. The opportunity arose to build a new slurry pit on the farm. The council agreed for me to build a concrete one, and then, as mentioned, Benneman came along looking for a slurry lagoon, a supply of slurry to harvest methane. We both looked a bit dubious at the start. How's this going to work? Like a lot of people do. I haven't heard of it before, but we haven't got nothing to lose. So in we went with both feet. Had a lot of initial meetings with Benneman, and they've been a really good company to work for. So a Truro-based company, Chris Mann, one of the directors, grown up in Newquay. So it's a good company to work with. Their energy and drive is a renewable fuel source. What they want to do is harvest the methane to use as a fuel, predominantly in the transport. So they're in a tie-up and a contract with Cormac to supply Cormac with methane to run vehicles. Cormac themselves have got a green energy policy to rule out the diesel by 2030 or whatever it is. So we set about building a completely new earth bank lagoon, which is lined 2019. It involved some modifications to the farm as well, to get the slurry from the farm into the new lagoon, because you have to push it into a reception pit and pump it in. I built the pit myself with a local plant hire contractor, a friend of mine, with some very sketchy plans from Benneman. Consisted of CAD drawings. They don't work in Cornwall. He didn't take into account landscape, ground conditions, and by the time we tried to start it, I said, it's going to be a summer project. Yeah, we had to start in October. Everybody knows, building in the winter with your cows in, and our weather is not a great thing. Once we started digging, we found that half of the site was clay as well. So as it rained, it just filled up with water. We persevered, got the pit dug, lined. So the basic design of the pit, we've got a 6 metre deep. At the top, it's 30 metres square. Pit, it's lined, is insulated between the ground and the first liner, the 60 mil of Celotex, to keep some heat into the slurry. And then we've got a capping layer which sits on the slurry of gas type material, so that from there on we are trapping all the methane that's produced from that slurry. Methane's bubbling out of your slurry all the time. You can't see it, but if you actually stand and watch slurry, which we've been told to do many a time, you'll see the bubbles coming out. It actually gets a bit addictive if you go into anybody else's farm now. You're stood looking at slurry is a whole new thing. You try, you wait and see how many of you do it when you get home. Yeah. So we're now trapping the slurry, or the methane on top of the slurry. That is raw methane, and from that point then, all we do is suck it out of there, filter it through some carbon filters, which takes it to methane is just methane. hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide mostly. Hydrogen sulfide is the dangerous bit. That's what will knock you out if you get in your slurry pit. That can be filtered out. So we filter that out through some carbon filters, and then we've got a third layer over our pit, which is like a bubble. Those of you who come down the A30 can now see the Christophers at Trenance. They've got a nice silver bubble. We've got a green one, so we're a bit more eco-friendly. So then we can recapture that methane and store it above our slurry pit. From there on, it's ready to use. There's no wizardry in having to use methane. It's a stable gas. A lot of our neighbours think we're sat on a bomb with this big bubble of methane sat there. It's not the case. It's quite an inert gas. It's a heavy gas, so you put a flame in it, it would probably go out. From there, we take it out, compress it. At that stage, we also take out the carbon dioxide, so we're just a pure methane. That then gives us the sellable product. I'm also in a pilot project now with New Holland. They've bought into Benneman. So we're running a methane tractor. We've got one of the first now. We're a trial farm for that. For the farmers and tractor people around here, you wouldn't know any difference to a diesel tractor. The only downside is capacity at the moment. Gas is a bulky liquid, so you can't store as much to get a good day's work. The big win for us, though, the methane is almost a byproduct. We're selling that. We're using it as a fuel. One of the things I do want to mention is we're going to have a generator. We'll be producing electricity ourselves. So by the end of it, if we have the tractor and the generator, we can be off-grid, just using methane as our fuel source. But the big win is the slurry. So the pit is anaerobic. It's pumped in, it's pumped back out. So what slurry we put in is then worked on anaerobic bacteria in there. We do not add anything else. That breaks down the slurry. The anaerobes break your solids down, so we get a good quality, a thinner, watery, almost slurry out. We've invested in a new tanker, or not a new, a fresh tanker, trailing shoe, and slurry metering technology in the John Deere Harvest Lab technology. So I now measure my nutrients as they go out. So nitrogen, P and K is all measured as it goes out of the tanker. So long term, if we do yield mapping, you can target your fertilizer application. With this, in the last 2 years, we've cut out our P and K. We don't buy any P and K now. We only have to buy in some nitrogen to top it up. So Kate's got some figures, but yeah, there's a 50% saving in fertilizer already. Also the storage facility, so we're meeting the new ruling, 6 months storage, keeps the water out. You wouldn't believe how much water your slurry pit covers. So our area is only 28 metres square on the top. In the first weekend, we've installed a water tank to catch all the surface water. It was over 20,000 litres of water in the first weekend. So we don't measure what your rainfall. What if you've got a large slurry pit? It's hundreds of thousands of litres of water diluting your slurry, causing you problems. And if you catch that water, you can use it for something else. You're not pumping water out of the ground or mains or whatever else. So the savings are a snowball. You think, oh right, I'm just saving on the gas. Then we're saving on our carbon footprint. Then we're saving on water. Then the fertilizer saving, and these things just snowball. So it's surprising how one thing leads to the other from a chance conversation for us, and the ability to not have to listen to anyone else maybe and take a lead. And there's no limit to it yet. So we're looking at the next stages. Obviously one day we could be completely self-sufficient. We can't get enough nitrogen in our slurry to cut out nitrogen bought in yet, but with our improving our soil structure, we're making savings each year. This year we've reseeded a lot and added a lot more clover to our mixes. We're trialing some red clover on the farm as well this year to lock a bit more nitrogen, so we'll see where that takes us. I'll let you have a few figures now as well.
Thanks. So like I said, we've been doing our farm carbon footprint with Becky. You can correct me now if I get this completely wrong. So our first carbon footprint we did back in 2020, and our whole farm emissions was 495 tonnes. When it was And that was for about 60 head of livestock on 134 acres. Last year, or the end of last year, when Hannah came out and did it for us, it's 503 tonnes with 180 head of stock on 134 acres. And that includes all your soil and everything, and obviously what we've been doing with the digestate and stuff. So some figures on what we're doing within the methane. We're capturing almost 22,750 kilos of, they call it fugitive methane a year, which is stopping 609 tonnes of CO2 equivalent disappearing up into the atmosphere. We've got just over 20,000 kilos of automotive grade methane, and that can power a T6 methane tractor for 840 hours, which is knocking out 13.9 litres of red diesel. And then we can provide, so we can run the farm. We've got like an 84% demand on our electric for the dairy, which is the equivalent of 55,200 kilowatt hours. And obviously, as Kev said, there's no rainwater going into that slurry. So the lagoon, they estimate the storage within the lagoon is now increased by 56% because there's no rainwater going in. And we can have 820,000 litres of free water because we're now capturing that and putting it in we've sunk a big tank out the back, so we've got quite a lot of water being kept. And it also means that Kev does 119 fewer slurry runs. I don't know if that helps you or not, but
I like it.
he does quite like his tractor, so I don't know if that's a saving for him or not. And as we said, we've eliminated all P&K purchases, and we've increased our land, but got a 55% reduction in fertiliser. It all sounds amazing, and it is amazing, but it's been bloody hard work. Like, it really has, isn't it? And it's only now starting to come right. So now it's working, it's harvesting. We've had our eyes open to the whole circular farming method, which I think we all knew, but when you see it in black and white and you see the implications and you see the knock-on effects, it's huge. Like, we're calving heifers in at under 2. We're looking at every ounce of protein and energy that goes into those cows, which is then coming out in the form of slurry and giving us the methane. And there's just so many elements to it that creates this farm carbon. And it's not just one answer. There is so many things we can all look at. Like I said, you can look at what you feed your animals, what age you're having them calved down at. If you've got too many, if you've not got enough, what your land use is, what your soil structure is. It's massive. And I think a lot of people just assume as farmers we do the same thing day in, day out. And I suppose a lot of us do, but sometimes you just need to stand back and go, actually, you know, is this what we need to be doing? Can I change? Can I not change? And for us, it's been a real, like, crikey, yeah. We're not just following somebody else's feet. We've kind of gone, oh, let's try this, let's try that. And there's so many opportunities out there. It has been a massive learning curve, isn't it?
I've got more to say.
Sorry.
That's fine. But yeah, just what Kent mentioned then, a few of the earlier speakers are stuck in a generator, or not stuck, but are in a generational farm. We are privileged to have, well, I don't know, privileged that we can do it ourselves. But it is good to probably challenge now. You've got to try and convince your parents that, you know, times move on, don't they? And I think a few of the speakers today are lucky enough to have done that, but there's probably a lot more that maybe sat here just that should, you know, you've got an idea, run with it, because that's all we've done, and it is paying off. It won't always, some of the stuff we've done, we've backtracked on, but that's the way it works. You won't know unless you try. You know, we're coming into the light of it now. It's took 3.5 years now, and there was stages in the middle where we thought it wasn't going to work, you know, but it is coming to the end of it now, and the added benefits is what you don't see. You've got your idea, but you know, we're doing a lot on carbon now that wasn't on the radar when we started the project. We were just out to gain a new slurry pit.
Yeah.
If we get any benefits, well, we do, and it goes on from there.
And it's been good for the children. Sorry, let's cut them off.
Okay.
Have I run out of time?
Yeah.
Right, I've run out of time, sorry.
Yeah, right, you do it.
I'm really pleased today.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I think we found people that can talk for longer about carbon than I can, so that's brilliant. No, well done. Brilliant. Okay, so massive topic, lots of opportunities for questions. Who's going to start us off with a question in this area? Come on, somebody must have one. Absolutely. Just, there you go, take that one.
I totally acknowledge that it hasn't been easy through your project, and I don't know, exactly what was involved, but you're in trials with a lot of people supporting you. I don't know what the funding's involved. Don't need to know that, but obviously trials have gone through. If we were to consider something like that on our farm, how much support is still available, and would you recommend it?
Yeah, definitely. Bannerman's, the company that installed it for us, have got a really great team, and they literally hold your hand through every step of it, because it's still quite a new thing. So it's not a case of, right, you've got a farm, here's some slurry, off you go. Like, they don't leave you to it. I know the slurry grant system offers have been released, and Bannerman have developed a floating cover. So there'll be a lot of you in this room that have already got an existing lagoon, which obviously what we've done is not going to be relevant, but they have devised like a giant lilo, isn't it?
Yeah, so you can add it to an existing system. I mean, like you just touched on, we're quite lucky in all of our being council tenants, and with Bannerman, our costs were grant covered, and being a pilot project, we were the first one in the country to have this system working. So,
but I think the floating cover is potentially part of the slurry grant system. You can get money towards it, and then obviously you can get the methane off that within Bannerman's, but you'd have to fund that part yourself. I don't know if they've got a figure for
they've got a model on payback then. So if the biggest payback for this is you harvest the methane and use it for electricity. We all know that if you're going to get a new contract that's 70p a unit in a minute in the dairy industry, it hardly adds up. So their big model now, don't quote me on it, but they're basically they could sell us electricity for 30p a unit produced by our own methane. That includes their generation costs and everything. So if you look at that as one of your major paybacks in your costings, if electric ends up staying at 70 or 80p a unit, that's quite a big help towards your payback.
And if you've got an existing lagoon as well, we all know the rules are coming to have everything covered. So if you've got a decent slurry store and you just literally need a lid for it, Bannerman's have created this floating lilo system, which, I mean, I haven't seen it working, but all the pictures and the evidence is there to say it does exactly the same thing. Covers 99% of it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Or captures 99% of the methane.
Where our system is 100% capture, if you're doing something existing, you're going to get a bit of leak around the edges, basically, but there's still a solution to it, and we'll give you similar results.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Do we see another question at the back, and then then you.
Hello, Steve Bone. Don't want to start a marital dispute up there, but just a quick question to you. At any time here, do you see variations in your methane production? Caveat to that question, do you feed for methane production?
I'll take the feed one, but no, we haven't. We haven't fed anything different. The cows are. We have a nutritionist that comes in, and we sample the grass when they're out grazing, feed accordingly. We sample the maize and silage when they're in, feed protein concentrate accordingly. We haven't changed anything. The next stage now is to look at enteric emissions, because obviously that's quite a big topic, isn't it? And Bannerman's are quite confident that they've got the balance right with the methane that's coming out of the back end compared to what's coming out via enteric. So we're going to try and do some trials with our feed company to change what we feed them to see if that gives us a different outcome. But it's, obviously like with anything, you can't just change it overnight and see a result, can you? You've got to allow sort of 3 weeks for a cow to adjust. So that is the next stage of our project now, is to see what we can do to either enhance or change methane emissions and enteric emissions.
Yeah, it's quite important, really. Like, the cows are fed, we're concentrating on the milk. The methane's a byproduct for us, but we're just lucky that there's advantages in it. And going on to your annual dips and peaks, no, not really. Methane is produced from the surface of the slurry, so if there's slurry in the pit, methane's being produced. Last summer, I emptied it by accident. We've got a system where we should stop at like 20 or 30%. That sensor wasn't working, so I sucked it out until there was nothing coming out. It never stopped producing methane. That bit of sludge that was on the floor of the tank still kept producing methane, even when we knew there was nothing in it. So once you're in a sealed system like that, there is a slight trough. So if you put new slurry in, it will feed off that until it's used the energy. And all you need to do is remix the pit, then, which is done internally, and then that will reboost your system. So you don't have to feed it. There's slight peaks and troughs, but never a stop in production.
The pit is like a cow's stomach, basically. It lives off that soup that you have in a cow's rumen to keep it working. It's exactly the same, and that was something that really I was pleased about with the whole project, was nothing had to change for the cows. And obviously, if we don't have cows, we don't have milk, we don't have money. So I was quite pleased that I didn't have to change anything. They didn't have to change. We had to change their bedding to EnviroBed, but they weren't worried about that, and we had to stop using formalin because obviously we couldn't allow that to go in the pit, but we use Pruex on the feet anyway, so it wasn't, nothing really changed at all for the cows, which was good.
Brilliant. I think we had another question in the middle here. Do you want to just put your hand up so the microphone can be brought over?
It was more a comment, really.
You can have a microphone now.
Thank you. Obviously, as we head towards carbon neutrality, it's really interesting that you're achieving this holy grail of farming off-grid, because I think for a lot of us that's becoming really attractive. I think they used to call it shutting the farm gate. Yeah. And whether it's by default or not, when you focus on carbon carbon neutrality, you're building this resilience into your business. And we've heard from 2 or 3 speakers today, very different farming systems that are achieving that. And I think that's really encouraging for all of us, because we can all look to maybe one of those speakers and think, yeah, well, I could begin to replicate that. And those surely are the businesses that will be here in 20, 30 years' time. Thank you.
I think that's a really good point, and I think, shall we use that as a sort of starting point to just conclude? I mean, I think from the breadth and the depth of conversations we've had, talking about what's often been seen as the only solution in terms of tree planting. We know tree planting has its place, and I think it's fantastic the work that we've got happening through Forest for Cornwall. Through Megan telling us about some of those more easy win things that we can start thinking about, but certainly thinking about baselining, measuring what we've got, whether that be our soil or our carbon footprint, thinking about exactly as you say, in this era of massively inflating costs, and we know there is a link between efficient use of resources and a reduction in our footprint, thinking what we can do to help build farm resilience, right through to some of those really high-tech solutions that we've just been talking about over here with what Kevin and Katie have been doing. And I think we should be really, really proud of what we're doing in Cornwall, because we are pioneering some of the solutions that actually will then be taken up across the agricultural industry in the UK. We've got some absolutely groundbreaking research going on, both within our research institutions, but also the applied research that's happening through Farm Net Zero, through the fantastic demonstration farms we've got with Mike that we've already heard about, and our other demonstration farms. So I would urge you, if you're not already involved or getting, in the loop with Farm Net Zero, please do get involved. But I also just would challenge all of you as farmers that there has been this increasing disconnect between our consumers and us as farmers in terms of this environmental impact of agriculture. Although it may seem that we're often painted as, public enemy number one in this space, we all have a role to play in terms of changing that conversation. And it all involves us all being brave, really starting to pioneer these new exciting things that are happening, and just starting to have those conversations and challenge some of the rhetoric. Because if we start to do that, we can really start to tell a positive story about the amazing work that's happening in Cornwall, be it soils, emission reductions or anything, because we are doing a lot of really good stuff, and we're doing that at the same time as producing food, sustaining our environments and promoting resilient businesses. So thank you very much.